Herzlich willkommen auf dem 25. Internationalen Literaturfestival Berlin. Mein Name ist Senta König und ich habe im Rahmen meines FSJs im Programmteam des ILB gearbeitet. Die heutige Buchvorstellung findet auf Englisch statt, deswegen wechsle ich nun die Sprachen. A very warm welcome to the 25th ILB. It is a great honor to welcome Samantha Harvey to the stage. Her latest novel, Orbital, which was awarded the Booker Prize 2024, is a poetic exploration of life on Earth and in space. We're following 6 astronauts orbiting the Earth over the course of 24 hours. That's equivalent to 16 days and nights aboard the space station. We observe their routines, their interactions with one another, and their innermost thoughts. I was deeply moved by the loving and poignant way in which Samantha Harvey depicts the Earth, humankind, and all of our shortcomings. The Guardian called Orbital an Anthropocene book resistant to doom, and I can only agree with that description. We're pleased that Beatrice Faßbender will be moderating today's event. She is a journalist, moderator, and translator. Beatrice Faßbender has translated poetry and prose by Priya Basil, Jeffrey Yang, and Sarah Bernstein, among others. She received scholarships from Banff International Literary Translation Center and Deutsche Übersetzerfonds. Reading from Umlaufbahn, the German translation of Orbital by Julia Wolf, will be Carolin Haupt. Carolin Haupt studied acting at the Hochschule für Musik und Theater Leipzig. As a voice actor, she regularly works for Arte and several audiobook publishers such as DAV, HarperCollins, and Surkamp Audio. Since 2019, Haupt has been a member of the ensemble of Schaubühne Berlin.
I would also like to welcome you all to tonight's book presentation. I'm Lena Klinkenberg. I'm part of the program team at IB, and I had the great joy of working with Senta last year. And she made me so much more excited for Orbital, even more than I already was. I would like to thank our main funders tonight, the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds, and also our lovely hosts at Berliner Festspiele. This event was only made possible by their generous support, for which we are very, very grateful. The reading will be followed by a meal for all performers in our festival kitchen next to the foyer. And I would like to thank the patron who is inviting all festival participants to tonight's dinner, the Barco Leibinger Gesellschaft von Architekten MBH. And before we now finally begin, I would like to ask you to switch off your phones and put them in your pocket, because tonight we want to focus on a great conversation about a great work of literature. And there are also no video, audio recordings allowed during the event. You're welcome to take a photo during the applause, and there will be also a book signing afterwards. And now I wish us all a great evening with Samantha Harvey. Thank you.
Let me just open this technical device. Welcome to this. We can't see you, but it looks very full. That's wonderful. Not a surprise, though. Welcome to the 25th International Literature Festival in Berlin. I have the absolute pleasure and honor to be here on stage with Carolin Haupt, right out there. And of course with Samantha Harvey. Welcome. Samantha, you told me, no, I saw before you told me that you were in Hamburg yesterday and you gave a reading at a planetarium. How was that? Did you get to see any stars?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a beautiful reading in German for half an hour.
Tap
Shall I come in a bit closer?
And then you can sit where you
Is
want.
this better?
Should work.
Is this better? Yeah? No? Okay. I'm gonna... Better? Yes? Okay. I'll stay close. Yeah, it was a projection of the Earth and the ISS orbiting the Earth while the reading was happening. And then sadly, when the reading ended, there was just a projection of me, which was less wonderful. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, actually.
I was going to say another star, but that's too cheesy, I'm sorry. Just a few words about Samantha Harvey. I guess that most of you who are here tonight know her work, have read at least one of her wonderful books. Samantha was born in 1975 in Kent, and she lives in Bath, where she already also studied philosophy and creative writing. And she actually holds a PhD in creative writing, so it's Dr. Samantha Harvey, theoretically.
Yeah. Theoretically, yeah.
And she has been teaching creative writing herself now since 2012. And just a brief question also about that, because I always wonder how it is about writing. How much and what is there to learn and to teach?
I think that creative writing is no less teachable than anything else. You know, it's no less teachable than law or gardening or, you know, whatever. I think that there are things you can learn. There's craft. You can definitely improve. I think that with everything, and creative writing is the same, there's always that little extra thing that you either maybe have or don't have. You know, that flair or whatever you call it, that can't be taught. But everything else can be taught. You know, and I think that when you're teaching writing, you sort of meet someone where they are. You don't try to make them into a writer that they aren't or that they can't be. You just meet them where they are and you improve them from there. So it's a very gratifying thing to do. And then sometimes you read something and it may be raw and it may be a mess, but it just has that thing, you know, that unidentifiable, wonderful, ineffable thing, and you just know it. And I love that, because you can help to make things happen for that person and help to help them realize a novel or whatever it is they're writing. So it is a lovely thing to be able to do.
Samantha debuted in 2009, and since then has published 6 books, 3 of which, if I'm correctly informed, have been translated into German. For example, the novel The Western Wind, the memoir The Shapeless Unease, and now the novel Orbital, which was, as you all know, awarded the Booker Prize in 2024. In German, it's called Umlaufbahnen, and it's translated by Julia Wolf. The Booker Prize is, of course, one of the most recognized awards in the world, probably the one after the Nobel. In what way did this award change your life?
Well, I didn't used to have audiences like this. I would have, you know, I'd be happy with an audience of 20 people before. It's changed everything for me. I was speaking to a previous winner of the Booker Prize a couple of weeks ago in Denmark, and he said that he described winning the prize as like being strapped to a missile. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly how it feels. It is overwhelming, and nobody quite prepares you for it, but it is career-changing and life-changing in all sorts of kind of wonderful ways. I think that once this year is over and I can get back to writing again, I will perhaps be able to process a little bit more what's happened, but as it is, you're just kind of thrown into it. There's no time to think, there's no time to prepare. Suddenly you're on a plane to Australia and that's it. So it's been quite a wild year, to be honest.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about your process of writing, because there are these two types of authors, I think. The one group would write a lot and then condense and revise, and others, I don't know, they chisel out slowly line for line, and then whatever's on the page will stay there. What's your process?
It's sort of neither of those.
Okay, there are three types of authors.
Three types, yeah. At least three types. I mean, I'm somewhere between. So I don't. I write first drafts that are line by line, very nice. I don't like making rough sentences ever. So I always craft the sentences, and what I end up with is a first draft that is full of really nice sentences in a book that's horrific and doesn't make any sense. So because I never really know what the shape of it should be, and exactly I don't plot. I think that's kind of clear with this book. I know I have a vision. And it's very clear to me, the vision, as something that I want to pursue. And it might be quite abstract, it might be an actual vision, it might be sounds, or sort of what would it sound like if it were a piece of music, or an emotion, or a mix of those things. And I write to that, and it takes me to the end of the first draft, the second draft, to understand how that should look on the page. So I'm always horrified by my first draft, because there's so much distance between what I have in my head and what's on the page. And I think that's the one thing that's got easier with the years of writing, is that it's not that I no longer kind of have a mental breakdown at the end of the first draft, because I still always do. But now I just know to expect it. So I just think, okay, this is the stage at which I have a breakdown, because it's not what I thought it would be, and I've wasted all this time, and how do I never learn? Okay, I'm doing this. I just watch myself doing that, and then I pick myself up and I write the second draft. So it's a very inefficient process. Orbital was this was a proper book at the beginning. It was a proper length book. It wasn't this short thing that it now is. It was written in the first person, in the first draft, from one character's point of view. And then it was written in the third person from that same character's point of view. It was set over a month, and it took me to the third draft to realize it should be over one day. So this is it's ill-advised. I just can't... I don't know how I can be teaching this subject. Honestly, I have to make so many mistakes, and each book comes with its own particular set of mistakes that I make.
It's really interesting to hear about all these mistakes, because it's such a perfect book. But it's but the road to that is tricky. Okay.
Yeah.
Your books are very, very different from each other, both formally, content, and style-wise. So we have The Western Wind, which is an historical crime novel. The Shapeless Unease, a personal memoir about your struggle with insomnia. And then, of course, Orbital, which you have called a space pastoral. And they are so different that it's really hard to imagine that they were conceived at the same desk, almost. What would you say is the connecting link between your books?
I mean, me. And I don't mean to be facetious. I think that I see all of my books as being kind of the same. I think that they all look quite different. And I think I'm always trying to find different modes and different ways to explore things. But in the end, I think that my books are always preoccupied by things. I don't even really know how to how to identify what those things are. I just feel like I'm kind of writing the same book over and over again and working out the same questions in my mind over and over again. I think that those questions are probably to do with partly time. I think all the books explore time and how we live in time in different ways. I think they're all quite emotionally driven. They're it's sort of, I mean, Orbital for sure is I think an emotional book. It's an emotional project. It came from an emotional center in me rather than an intellectual one. And I think that also with each book, and maybe the reason they look different is that I'm always trying to keep myself interested, so I always want to try something a bit formally different. So the Western Wind, which I think, so here is sort of, in Germany is marketed as crime, but I think that's quite misleading. It's not really a crime novel, but that was my sort of radical attempt at writing a plot. And this one is sort of an attempt at writing something that is entirely plotless, as has been pointed out to me many times. I think I'm always trying to do something a bit different with voice, with structure, with form, the way you can sort of use time in narrative and compress and expand time. And so I think they're all sort of a formal experimentation for me, but they're all kind of pursuing the same sorts of questions. I often write about religion. There's only one section in this book that's overtly about religion. And in fact, I'm going to read it in a while, but I've tried to avoid God as much as I could with this book, but I'm always drawn back to faith and the possessing of a religious faith and what that might be like, since I don't, and I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, it's to me, the books all just seem kind of sometimes frustratingly similar in a way. It's always, I think most writers just want to get away from themselves when they write, and you do that by inventing this subject that isn't you, and then you find you're just writing about yourself again.
So let's hear a little bit from you, and then Carolin will take over, but Carolin will jump back in the book to the front, to Orbit 3, I think, because every chapter, I think it was hard to understand backstage, but I think you were introduced a little bit to the book, right? And that it's 16 chapters. No, wait a minute. Yes, 16 chapters, yeah. 16 orbits where this spacecraft circles around Earth. And so every chapter is the headline, the chapter is called Orbit 3, Descending, Orbit 4, Ascending, etc.
So I think this piece needs no introduction except to say that the two people I name in this, Nell and Sean, are two of the astronauts on the spacecraft in this one day. Nell wants sometimes to ask Sean how it is he can be an astronaut and believe in God, a creationist God, that is. But she knows what his answer would be. He'd ask how it is she can be an astronaut and not believe in God. They'd draw a blank. She'd point out of the port and starboard windows where the darkness is endless and ferocious, where solar systems and galaxies are violently scattered, where the field of view is so deep and multi-dimensional that the warp of space-time is something you can almost see. Look, she'd say, what made that but some heedless, hurling, beautiful force? And Sean would point out of the port and starboard windows where the darkness is endless and ferocious at exactly the same violently scattered solar systems and galaxies, and at the same deep and multi-dimensional field of view warped with space-time, and he would say, what made that but some heedful, hurling, beautiful force? Is that all the difference there is then between their views? A bit of heed. Is Sean's universe just the same as hers, but made with care to a design? Hers an occurrence of nature and his an artwork. The difference seems both trivial and insurmountable. She remembers walking around a wood with her father one winter's day when she was 9 or 10, and there was a full-size tree that they almost walked straight past until they realized it was man-made. It was a sculpture made from tens of thousands of sticks glued together, woven to form the appearance of knots and bark and boles and branches. You couldn't tell it apart from the other bare, wintry trees, except that once you knew it was an artwork, it pulsed with a different energy, a different atmosphere. This feels to her what separates her universe and Sean's. A tree made by the hand of nature, and a tree made by the hand of an artist. It's barely any difference at all, and the profoundest difference in the world.
Warum kann ein Raumschiff nicht wie ein altes Bauernhaus eingerichtet sein? Mit geblümter Tapete und Eichenbalken, sagt Pietro beim Frühstück. Falschen Eichenbalken natürlich. Besonders leicht, nicht brennbar. Und abgewetzte Sessel und lauter solche Sachen. Wie ein altes italienisches Bauernhaus. Oder ein englisches. Und sogleich sehen alle Nell an, die Engländerin ist und mit den Schultern zuckt. Sie rührt in ihrem Beutelchen mit Perlowka herum. Gerstengraupengrütze, die Roman und Anton ihr aus den russischen Essensvorräten überlassen haben. Mengt Sirup unter die Masse. Besser noch wie ein altes japanisches Haus, sagt Ziehe. Viel heller, weniger Kram. Da wäre ich dabei, ertönt Sean, der wie ein Engel über ihnen schwebt. Er zeigt mit dem Teelöffel auf Ziehe, als wäre ihm gerade eine Idee gekommen. Ich war mal in einem ganz tollen japanischen Haus, erzählt er, in Hiroshima, eine Art Bed and Breakfast, geführt von amerikanischen Christen. Ihr amerikanischen Christen seid doch wirklich überall, sagt Ziehe und greift mit ihren Essstäbchen nach einem Stück Lachs. Jep, selbst im Weltraum entkommst du uns nicht. Bald sind wir dich los, sagt Roman. Ah, aber dann kehrt ihr auf die Erde zurück und das ist unsere Brutstätte, antwortet Sean und sieht sich nickend um. Könnte mir schon gefallen, wenn es hier aussähe wie in so einem alten japanischen Haus. Pietro isst seine Cornflakes auf und sichert seinen Löffel auf dem magnetischen Tablett. Wisst ihr, worauf ich mich schon freue, wenn es dann soweit ist? Fragt er. Sachen, die ich nicht brauche. Darauf freue ich mich. Überflüssige Dinge. Irgendeine sinnlose Deko auf einem Regal. Ein Teppich. Roman lacht. Nicht Alkohol oder Sex, du freust dich auf einen Teppich. Ich habe nicht gesagt, was ich auf dem Teppich machen werde. Stimmt, sagt Anton, hast du nicht und dabei soll's bitte bleiben. Was würdest du denn tun? Fragt Nell. Ziehe zwinkert. Genau, Pietro, was würdest du tun? Da liegen und vom Weltraum träumen. Die unausgesprochene Maxime an Bord lautet Diskretion. Es gibt ohnehin sehr wenig Platz und Privatsphäre. Monatelang sitzen sie einander auf der Pelle und atmen die gleiche von den anderen zu häufig ein- und wieder ausgeatmete Luft. Sie wollen nicht auch noch den Rubikon ins Innenleben der anderen überschreiten. Die Vorstellung von der fliegenden Familie ist nicht gänzlich unzutreffend, aber dann wiederum sind sie überhaupt nicht wie eine Familie. Sie sind zugleich viel mehr und viel weniger. Für die kurze Zeit im Weltraum sind sie füreinander alles, weil es außer ihnen hier oben niemanden gibt. Sie sind Gefährten, Kollegen, Mentoren, Ärzte, Zahnärzte, Friseure. Bei Weltraumspaziergängen, bei Start und Wiedereintritt in die Atmosphäre und in Notfällen sind sie die Rettungsleinen der anderen. Und sie müssen füreinander die gesamte Menschheit repräsentieren, für Millionen andere Menschen herhalten. Auch müssen sie ohne alles Weltliche auskommen. Familien, Tiere, Wetter, Sex, Wasser, Bäume, zu Fuß gehen. An manchen Tagen wollen sie einfach nur zu Fuß gehen oder sich auf den Boden legen. Wenn sie Menschen oder Gegenstände vermissen, wenn die Erde sich so weit weg anfühlt, dass sie tagelang von einer tiefen Traurigkeit übermannt werden und selbst der Anblick eines Sonnenuntergangs über der Arktis ihre Stimmung nicht aufhält, dann müssen sie einer der anderen Personen an Bord ins Gesicht schauen und dort den Grund finden, weiterzumachen. Irgendeinen Trost. Das ist nicht immer der Fall. An manchen Tagen schaut Nell vielleicht Sean an und hasst ihn einfach nur dafür, dass er nicht ihr Ehemann ist. Oder Anton wacht gereizt auf, weil keiner dieser Leute seine Tochter oder sein Sohn ist. Oder jemand oder etwas anderes Geliebtes. So ist das manchmal. Und an einem anderen Tag blicken sie ihr Gegenüber an und im Lächeln der Person, in der Art, wie sie sich konzentriert oder ist alles und jeder enthalten, die sie je geliebt haben. Alles zusammen, einfach da. Und die Menschheit, deren Essenz sich nun auf diese Handvoll Menschen beschränkt, ist nicht länger eine ferne Spezies, bestimmt von befremdlichen Unterschieden, sondern eine nahe und fassbare Sache. Schon des Öfteren haben sie sich darüber unterhalten, dass es sich anfühlt, als würden sie miteinander verschmelzen. Als ließen sie sich weder voneinander noch von dem Raumschiff gänzlich trennen. Was auch immer sie waren, bevor sie herkamen, wie sehr sich ihre Ausbildung und Vorgeschichten, ihre Motive und Charaktereigenschaften unterschieden, aus welchem Land sie auch stammen und wie groß die Konflikte zwischen ihren Nationen sind. Die subtile Macht ihres Raumschiffs macht sie hier oben alle gleich. Sie choreografieren die Bewegungen und Funktionen des Schiffskörpers, während er seine perfekte Choreografie um den Planeten ausführt. Anton, still, trockener Humor, sentimental, jemand, der bei Film und bei besonders ergreifenden Szenerien vor dem Fenster unverhohlen heult. Anton ist das Herz des Raumschiffs. Pietro, der Verstand. Roman, der aktuelle Kapitän, kompetent und geschickt, kann alles reparieren, den Roboterarm millimetergenau manövrieren, die komplexesten Schaltplatten verkabeln, die Hände. Sean, die Seele, hier, um sie alle davon zu überzeugen, dass sie Seelen haben. Ziehe, methodisch, gerecht, weise, nicht ganz zu greifen oder zu definieren, das Bewusstsein. Nell, mit dem 8 Liter Lungenvolumen einer Taucherin, der Atem. Dann einigen sie sich darauf, dass die Metapher idiotisch ist, unsinnig. Aber ganz abschütteln können sie dennoch nicht. Etwas daran, wie sie auf der niedrigen Erdumlaufbahn dahinrasen, bringt diese Vorstellung von ihnen als Einheit hervor, mit ihrem weitläufigen Schiff als lebendigem Teil davon. Sie hatten gedacht, dass sie das Leben in einer komplexen, lebenserhaltenden Maschine beängstigend finden würden. Den Gedanken, das sollte nur ein einziger Teil der Maschine versagen, von einem Moment auf den anderen einfach alles vorbei sein könnte. Ein Feuer, ein Leck im Treibstofftank, Strahlung, ein Zusammenstoß mit einem Meteoriten. Und in manchen Momenten finden sie es auch beängstigend, aber meistens nicht. Immerhin leben alle Wesen in lebenserhaltenden Maschinen, gemeinhin Körper genannt, und die werden auch alle irgendwann den Geist aufgeben. Ihre spezielle Maschine, so gefahrvoll sie auch sein mag, beschränkt sich wenigstens auf die Spur ihrer Erdumlaufbahn. Und da gibt es kaum Überraschungen. Alles Unvorhergesehene wird vorhergesehen, rund um die Uhr beobachtet, gewissenhaft überwacht, wie besessen repariert, umfassend gesichert, sorgfältig gepolstert. Es gibt hier kaum scharfe Gegenstände, keine Stolperfallen, nichts kann herunterfallen. Im Gegensatz dazu birgt die irdische Freiheit vielfältige Gefahren. Da streift man ganz unüberwacht umher, ganz ungebunden und ist den Gefahren von Kanten und Höhen und Straßen und Waffen und Moskitos und Seuchen und Gletscherspalten ausgeliefert und dem unglückseligen Chaos von 8 Millionen Spezies im Kampf ums Überleben. Manchmal kommt ihnen ein überraschender Gedanke in den Sinn. Sie sind eingekapselt in einem U-Boot, das allein durch die Untiefen des luftleeren Raums taucht. Und wenn sie ihre Kapsel verlassen, werden sie sich weniger sicher fühlen. Auf die Erde werden sie als Fremde zurückkehren, Außerirdische, die sich in einer verrückten neuen Welt zurechtfinden müssen.
Vielen Dank, Carolin. In how many languages have you heard your book now?
I haven't heard it read in many languages, actually. There are something like 50 translations, I think, but I have only heard it read in German, French. I don't know if Australian counts. It seems like it would be a wonderful thing to sort of hear a part of it read in all of those different languages. Maybe that would be a cure for my insomnia, in fact.
So what sparked this book?
So it's kind of, there are so many different possible origin stories with books. You know, how far back do you go? And I know when I was a teenager, I used to collect, I don't know why, but I used to collect quotes that I found in books, I guess, things that astronauts had said about being in space, in particular things that they said about looking back at the Earth from space. And I was really fascinated by it. I'm not really sure why, because I wasn't really into space as a kid. But I was really into this idea of what the Earth looks like from space as a perspective on our home. So in some ways, I guess it started there. And when I was sort of thinking about what to write next, I was trying to think of a novel I could write that felt that was about the Earth and that was about the beauty of the Earth. That was sort of nature writing as well as novel writing. And I just couldn't find any way into it. I couldn't sort of figure out what perspective to have or how to do it, and how to sort of talk in that novel about climate change and the things that we're doing to the Earth. So I was really struggling. And then it occurred to me that maybe I could sort of come off the surface of the Earth and write a book from there. And there's always this kind of sinking feeling I have at these points, because I think, oh no, that sounds like so much research. And this happened with my last novel, The Western Wind, which I knew I wanted to write about confession, sort of religious confession, so a priest hearing the confession of a penitent. And then I realized as I pursued that idea that it needed to be in the past, and then I ended up in the 1400s in that same sinking feeling of, I know nothing about this. I've got to start from the beginning, from children's books. So once I realized with Orbital that I wanted to look back at the Earth and write this kind of sort of pastoral novel from space, I started just looking at all those images from space that we have access to. And they were so extraordinary, and they made me feel something that I think I can only sort of equate to a feeling of being in love, this huge, expansive feeling. It's got a complex feeling. And I thought, well, I'm just going to write from there. I'll see what happens. And in fact, I did give up after the first month or so. I just felt that it was kind of ridiculous and that nobody was going to want to read this book by me, some middle-aged woman in southwest England writing about being in space. when clearly I've never been to space, and I'm never going. So I felt that it just wasn't, that creatively and imaginatively maybe I could do it, but that somehow it was absurd. And then I just sort of came back to what I'd written, and it did have that same energy, that electricity, and I thought, okay, I will pursue this idea, and I'll just do it as well as I possibly can and see. And I sent some to my agent and said, thumbs up, thumbs down. And she just said, yeah, thumbs up. So I thought, okay, I'll continue.
Well, we have to thank her then also a little bit. So we just heard about the 6 astronauts and cosmonauts who are on this spacecraft, with 4 men and 2 women from the United States, Russia, Italy, England, what am I missing? And Japan, of course. So what were you looking for in your characters for this book? What interested you?
Well, it's funny because I think for all of my other novels, character has been the central project. You know, it's been about picking one consciousness and narrating the whole book from that one consciousness. And that's what I'm really interested in as a writer. And so I sort of, when I was assembling my crew for this book, I knew that there needed to be roughly 6 people because it's based on the ISS and there's usually a crew of around 6. And I knew sort of what nationalities they needed to be. There are always Russians there are always Americans. There's always someone from the European Space Agency, and there's often Japanese. So that's just decided by the nations that contribute money to the ISS. I'm sorry there are no Germans. And it's ridiculous as well that there's a British astronaut, because it's very rare, because we don't really give any money to the space project. So I kind of knew that I needed this makeup of characters. But as I said earlier, I then decided, because it's what I've always done, I decided to narrate the whole thing in the first person from the perspective of the one British astronaut. I think partly because I felt like I wasn't there for culturally appropriating anyone. And I realized that just wasn't working, you know, that wasn't what the book wanted. It didn't really want to have that human scale. It didn't want everything to be filtered through one person. It needed to be able to escape the confines of all of the characters and to be able to go somewhere else. So in a way, the book that it became is one in which the characters aren't really that important, which is really unusual for me. They're there, they are part of what's happening, they are as important as everything else, but no more important. So it was sort of a book that's not about character, and I know a lot about these characters that isn't in the book. Some more than others, but it was sort of working against my own instincts in some ways, because I had to sort of untether myself from all of my writerly instincts and be a bit freer. And actually, once I decided that, and I realized it wasn't going to be in the point of view of any one of the astronauts, and sometimes not in the point of view of any of them, it was very liberating.
Well, actually, I thought when I read it that the narrator in this case is the main character, probably, and it's such an interesting voice. It's I thought, so I have a very, very strange mixture in my head when I think of this voice. So one is, I don't know whether you've seen Wim Wenders, what's called in English, Wings of Desire.
Yeah.
So there's this scene where one of the angels at the State Library here in Berlin, and he passes by people sitting there at their desks, and he hears what they are thinking, but just in passing, you know. So he just hears like little bits and pieces. So that, and very weirdly, because it's not the, this narrating voice here is not mean, but I also, maybe because it was set in space, but HAL 9000 from 2001 Odyssey, Space Odyssey, who famously, this computer, this intelligent computer in Stanley Kubrick's film, who famously turns against the humans that he's working with. And so maybe a friendly cousin of this evil computer. So I have this very strange mixture when I think of this voice, but it's such a unique voice. So how did you find that? And did you have any models? Doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know. I feel like I don't think there are any rules in writing, but if there are, I guess that they're all broken in this, because, and it wasn't that I meant to do that. I think the book that I wrote before Orbital was my memoir about insomnia, which I really didn't mean to write. I just was writing in very sleep-deprived states, and I was writing whatever came to my mind, and sometimes it was quite mad. And I had no design for it. I just wrote freely, and sometimes it was first person, sometimes second, sometimes third, sometimes it was a kind of collective first person. Sometimes it was essays, sometimes it was more like a play, sometimes it's like free monologue. There's a case study in there. There's a short story in the middle of it that doesn't have anything to do with anything else that happens. And when I finished that book, I didn't know that it would be a book, and then it sort of ended up being a book. I sort of, something in my writing brain had just sort of shifted or freed up a little bit. And I'd sort of come away from some of the conventions of writing and into something that was really, really instinctive. And I'm not saying that instinct is always good, and I think it needs some tempering, and we need to be mindful of our readers and to treat readers well and generously. And so it wasn't that I felt I just wanted to be self-indulgent, but I thought if I could take some of that freedom that I felt writing that book, and the lack of planning and the lack of architecture, just go with whatever voice comes, maybe I could write a different kind of novel. So that's how Orbital came about, I think. It was sort of trying to carry over from that very emotional, instinctive process of writing about insomnia, and bring it into a novel, which is a very sort of cerebral thing, really. It's quite hard to be instinctive with a novel because it asks so much of you, and it asks for so much structure and so much thought and premeditation. But I think that this voice just came out of that sort of mode shifting that I did with The Shapeless Unease, as just moving between first, third, second person, and not questioning too much why I was doing it. I mean, I know for sure in the editing process, my editors wanted there to be less second person in it, and I didn't really know that there was very much. That was not a conscious thing, and once I saw it, I could see that was quite irritating. So I took some out. So there was a quite a rigorous editing process of it, but it was very instinctive.
So we have a second part to read. I'm looking at the clock. Oh, now I see the big one. We were told there's a big one, and I always looked at this one, and then I thought, oh, there's no clock, but the clock is up there. But we have it's like 7 minutes or something, roughly. Okay. So a second part from, I don't know which orbit, some other orbit.
Another orbit.
Ja, wir sind jetzt bei Ziel, aber ich bin aus. Kann ich was ändern? Nee, jetzt bin ich an. Okay, also wir sind bei der Japanerin Zie. Auf der Rückseite des Fotos steht nun unter Tag der Mondlandung 1969 in der Handschrift ihrer Mutter: Für die nächste und alle noch kommenden Mondlandungen. Wenn Zie diese Worte liest, erscheinen sie ihr so untypisch für ihre Mutter, dass sie sich fragt, ob ihre Mutter vielleicht etwas gewusst, ihren baldigen Tod geahnt hat und ihr zuvor auf diesem Weg noch etwas Gefühl unterjubeln wollte. Bei diesem Gedanken breitet sich eine Leere in ihr aus. Sie vermisst ihre Mutter. Sie vermisst ihre Härte, ihre Geradlinigkeit, ihre distanzierte Art. Ihre Mutter war einmalig, das weiß sie. Denn wie viele Menschen haben während der Explosion einer Atombombe in der Wiege gelegen? Nicht viele. Und wie viele Menschen haben an jenem schrecklichen Augusttag ihre Mutter an diese Bombe verloren? Das Leben von Zies Mutter war still und statisch, nicht im entferntesten wie ihr eigenes. Wenn Zie es sich genau überlegt, ist das Foto von ihr am Strand das perfekte Sinnbild für dieses Leben. Die Welt, die im Vorbeirauschen verschwimmt, während ihre Mutter ganz still steht. Aber auch wenn ihre Leben nicht unterschiedlicher sein könnten, verdankt Zie der Mutter doch all ihren Mut, ihre Resilienz und Dickhäutigkeit. Auf alles im Leben war sie vorbereitet, selbst auf schwierige, schmerzhafte, gefährliche Dinge. Die Freude an allem Schwierigen und Gefährlichen verdankt sie der Mutter, ihren Mumm. Ihr Testpilotinnenhirn, das es ihr ermöglicht, das Fliegen zu denken, träumen, atmen und einen gewissen sportlichen Wetteifer mit dem Tod, dem sie immer überlegen scheint. Das Gefühl von Unverletzbarkeit, Unverwundbarkeit, auf stille, unerwartete Art verwegen. Natürlich weiß sie, dass sie es nicht ist, unbesiegbar. Doch sie stammt aus einer Familie, die durch einen Spalt entkommen ist, einen feinen Riss der Geschichte, die einen Weg herausgefunden hat, während alles um sie herum in sich zusammengefallen ist. Ihr Großvater krank am Tag der Bombe, krank von der Arbeit und allein mit dem Baby, während ihre Großmutter zum Markt ging. Von ihrer Großmutter fand man keine sterblichen Überreste. Von keinem der Arbeiter in der Munitionsfabrik in Nagasaki, in der der Großvater gearbeitet hatte und wo er auch, wäre er nicht krank gewesen, an diesem Tag gearbeitet hätte, blieb viel übrig. Alle in Japan waren zu diesem Zeitpunkt krank, nach Jahren des Kriegs. Alle waren halb verhungert oder hatten Cholera oder Dysenterie oder Malaria oder irgendeinen anderen Virus, eine andere Infektion, die in ihren Körpern ohne Hoffnung auf Heilung vor sich hinrasselte. Ihr Großvater war schon eine Weile an einem dieser Viren erkrankt und es war der erste Tag, den er sich freinahm. Warum ausgerechnet diesen Tag? Wäre er zur Arbeit gegangen, wäre er gestorben. Wäre er nicht zu Hause geblieben, wäre das Baby nicht mit ihm zu Hause geblieben, wäre das Baby, Zies Mutter, an dem Tag mit zum Markt gegangen, hätte sein kurzes Leben ein frühes Ende gefunden und Zie hätte nie existiert. Ihre Familie ist durch einen Riss im Schicksal entschlüpft. Zie betrachtet das Foto eingehend. In ihrem Elternhaus hat es an der Wand gehangen. Sie erinnert sich daran, wie ihre Mutter darauf gedeutet hatte. Schau, Zie-chan, das bin ich, an dem Tag, an dem die Männer zum Mond geflogen sind. Selbst jetzt weiß sie nicht genau, was sie an diesem Tag der Mondlandung am Strand sieht. Sie weiß nicht, wie sie diese seltsame Szene deuten soll, das Missverhältnis von Bild und Titel. Sie mustert das Gesicht ihrer Mutter, befragt den mürrischen Gesichtsausdruck nach Hinweisen, was er zu bedeuten hat. Doch sie weiß es nicht. Alles, was sie hineininterpretiert, ist nachträglich, aufgesetzt, bloße Vermutung. Warum wurde das Foto aufgehängt, als Zie noch ein Kind war? Was war so besonders oder aussagekräftig oder bedeutsam daran? Sagte da eine Mutter zu ihrer Tochter: Jetzt zeige ich dir, was in deinem Leben möglich ist. Die annähernde Grenzenlosigkeit dessen, was Menschen, also auch du, tun können. Aber warum dann der mürrische Gesichtsausdruck? Warum keine hoffnungsfrohe Miene? Oder sagte sie, Da reisen ein paar Männer zum Mond. Oder ist da etwa eine Frau dabei? Gar eine nicht weiße, nicht amerikanische Frau? Dir ist bestimmt nicht entgangen, dass dies eine Ansammlung von Männern auf dem Höhepunkt ihrer Männlichkeit ist. Mit ihren Raketen und Steuerraketen und Ladekapazitäten. Und die Augen der Welt sind auf sie gerichtet. So ist die Welt nämlich. Ein Spielplatz, ein Versuchsfeld für Männer. Nimm es nicht mit ihnen auf, denn jeder Versuch, dich mit ihnen zu messen, wird dich nur entmutigen. Du wirst dich ihnen unterlegen fühlen und gebrochen. Und warum in einen Wettstreit treten, den du nicht gewinnen kannst? Warum dich selbst zum Scheitern verurteilen? Du sollst bitte wissen, meine Tochter, dass du ihnen nicht unterlegen bist. Und du sollst dieses Wissen in deinem Herz hüten wie einen Schatz und dein unbedeutendes Leben, so gut und würdevoll es geht, leben. Wirst du das für mich tun? Oder wollte sie sagen, schau dir nur diese Männer an, wie sie zum Mond fliegen. Mein Kind, fürchte dich vor dem, wozu Menschen fähig sind. Denn wir wissen, was das bedeutet, nicht wahr? Wir wissen um das Trara und den Glanz des menschlichen Pioniergeists. Und wir wissen um das Wunder der geteilten Atome. Und wir wissen, was diese Fortschritte anrichten können. Deine Großmutter wusste es nur zu gut, als sie zu einem Geräusch, das sie nicht kannte, und einem Lichtblitz, der zugleich weit entfernt und sehr nah wirkte, als wäre er ihrem eigenen Kopf entsprungen, vom Bürgersteig trat, und in ihrer Verwirrung lag ein Kernwissen, dass es das gewesen sein könnte. Ein Wissen, das sofort eine Vision in ihr aufsteigen ließ. Eine Vision von mir, ihrem ersten und einzigen Kind, die auch ihre letzte Vision sein sollte. Und so sage ich zu dir, siehe, meinem ersten und einzigen Kind, dass du vielleicht voller Bewunderung diese Männer betrachtest, die Fuß auf den Mond setzen. Aber du darfst nie den Preis vergessen, den die Menschheit für diese Momente des Ruhms zahlt. Denn die Menschheit weiß nicht, wann es Zeit ist, aufzuhören, Feierabend zu machen. Sei also wachsam, will ich damit sagen, auch wenn ich gar nichts sage. Bleib wachsam. Und auch wenn die erste der möglichen Botschaften, die am ehesten aus der Luft gegriffene, die unglaubwürdigste war, so erscheint es sie jedoch, als habe sie diese Botschaft genommen, aufgenommen und ausgereizt. Selbst wenn es gar nicht das war, was die Mutter ihr mit dem Foto hatte sagen wollen, hat sie sich für diese Botschaft entschieden. Und hier ist sie nun. Sie hat ihre Mutter so verstanden. Schau dir nur diese Männer an, die auf dem Mond landen. Schau nur, was mit dem nötigen Willen und Vertrauen möglich ist, mit den richtigen Gelegenheiten. Und all das kannst du haben. Wenn die das können, kannst du es auch. Und mit das meine ich, was immer du willst. Alles. Verschwende nicht das Leben, das dir auf so wundersame Weise gegeben wurde, wo doch ich, deine Mutter, an jenem Tag genauso gut mit meiner Mutter hätte auf dem Markt sein können, wenn nur ein paar winzige Details anders verlaufen wären. Ich wäre eines der jüngsten Opfer der Atombombe gewesen. Das Ereignis hätte mich vielleicht getötet und du wärst nie auf die Welt gekommen. Aber du bist auf die Welt gekommen. Und hier sind wir nun also. Und dort sind die Männer auf dem Mond. Verstehst du? Du bist also auf der Gewinnerseite. Du gewinnst. Und vielleicht kannst du ein Leben führen, das diesen Umstand ehrt und vermehrt. Und Sia hatte auf die stille Bitte ihrer Mutter still geantwortet. Ja, ich verstehe.
Vielen Dank. I wanted to ask you about this term that you coined for this book, the space pastoral, because a pastoral, roughly speaking, is an idealized depiction of rural life. So obviously it's not rural. We're in space, and but together with the astronauts, we see this incredible beauty of Earth from up there. The astronauts are in awe, and so are we. It's a loving celebration of an ode to Earth. However, there's also a lot of destruction in there that is also visible from up there. the destruction via global warming, for example, melting glaciers, burning woods, changing coastlines, with trash circling around Earth, and not to mention a huge typhoon that is about to hit land during these 16 orbits. And borders, for example, they may not be visible, but they are mentioned. So it seems a lot of harsh realism in this idealized world, so to say. So how do you, where does the pastoral come from?
That's a really good question. And it's probably not, I mean, there's a real, I was hesitant to call it a pastoral because it's such a problematic term, partly because the pastoral is sort of often used in quite a weaponized way to call up a past that never existed, you know, and to become nostalgic for something that didn't exist. And we can see the danger of that now in a political discourse and this idea of the past as something perfect. So I didn't want to invoke pastoral in that way, more a sense of what I was saying before about the power of the natural world to stir in us feeling quite grand feelings, and feelings of awe and wonder and love, I guess. And the more I sort of explored the subject, the more I began, I think, quite sentimentally, to see the space station as this sort of, as a kind of shepherd type craft, you know, this, it's sort of patiently circling the Earth, and has been for 25 years. It's not going anywhere, it's just sort of attending to the Earth. And that seems to me, in contrast to what's happening with space travel now, this sort of new era that's very much about getting away from the Earth and getting back to the moon and getting to Mars, and usually, you know, for the most part, driven by quite individualistic motives of gain and resource extraction and so on. So I had this idea of it as this sort of quite, as a peace project, I suppose, and something that has this sort of tender attending to the Earth. So I realize that is a very sentimental and romanticized way of seeing it, and I didn't want to suppose that what we see when we look at the Earth is something unspoiled, but I wanted to explore that idea that when we look at the Earth from space, even from low Earth orbit, which is only, you know, 400 kilometers up, it seems so perfect, so unspoiled, pre-industrial. And of course we know that it's not. And there's that contradiction between what we can see and what we know to be the case, and how do the astronauts navigate that contradiction? What must it be like to see a borderless Earth, but to know that borders dictate almost everything that we do on this Earth, and are the cause of almost every war. So it was that sort of contradiction I wanted to look at, and the way this amazing spacecraft affords us this view of the Earth, which seems to be true, but we know isn't true.
Well, time, well, the book is very much about time, but time here is not going in circles, it's just running away. And and it has run out. I would have asked you a lot about humor, about Russians and Americans and so on next time.
The sequel.
Read this wonderful book. If you haven't, please do. It makes you humble. It makes you look very different at your tiny, little, fragile own life, and it makes you very thankful. And that's something that not everybody, that not every book does, but this one does. So thank you all for being here. Go grab a book, have it signed by Samantha out there in the foyer. And and thank you so much, Carolin, for this beautiful reading of the beautiful translation by Julia Wolf. And thank you so much, Samantha Harvey.
Thank you.